Hey there, guys. So, the movie Black Panther just came out today, and I just got back from the cinema. I went to see it earlier, and I figured I'd give you guys a movie review. Now, the first thing I did when I got back from the cinema was I went online and I checked on Rotten Tomatoes because I wanted to know what the general consensus was about this movie. Now, I've known for a long time that Rotten Tomatoes isn't a reliable source. I know for a fact that a lot of the critics that are on there, the featured critics anyway, not the audience critics, a lot of them are, basically just paid shills. That Disney and all these corporations pay these guys to say whatever they want them to say about the movies, and that's where the overall rating came from. So it came as no surprise to me when I saw that this movie had a 97% rating. So, according to these big time critics, they want you to believe that this movie is practically flawless. Okay, 97% might as well be 100%. Okay, we're talking legendary status here. We're talking about one of the greatest movies of all time. Well, I went to see this movie, and I think you guys can tell by my tone what I'm gonna say. Complete fucking nonsense. Where do I begin with how many flaws and many issues that this movie had? I mean, this movie was one of the biggest disappointments in recent years because I was very excited about this film. When I saw the trailer to the movie, it looked as if it was going to be a really, really impressive sci-fi action flick. I really, really liked the Captain America Civil War movie, which came out not that long ago, and Black Panther was one of the more interesting characters in that movie. I felt that his action set pieces in that movie and the way that they introduced him was actually really impressive, and it had me excited for his solo movie. I left the theatre so disappointed about this movie. This movie was one of the biggest disappointments, like I said, in recent years. And where do I begin? Now, let's start by talking about some of the issues with this movie. First of all, ignore these critics, right? These critics are just shills. I'll tell you the truth. I'll be honest. The action in this movie was dreadful. And I'm talking about some of the worst sci-fi action that I've ever seen. I mean, first of all, there's a scene in this movie which takes place in a nightclub. It's quite early on in the movie. It's one of the big introducing action sections of the movie. I had no idea what was going on. I mean, the lighting in that scene was so dark. There was so much shaky cam. There were so many multiple camera angles for the same shot. I mean, it was just so it was nauseating. It was just some of the worst action I've seen in a long time. In fact, do you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of Taken 3. You guys remember that movie? Where something as simple as Liam Neeson punching someone or jumping over a fence needed like 10 different camera shots and a shaky angle and all that shit. It was just nauseating. It gave me a headache. And I had no idea what was going on. Okay, there's the bold woman with the big staff swinging it around. I can't see who she's hitting or who she's targeting at. There's people shooting in all different directions, so that clearly the geography of the scene was all messed up. They didn't plan for when a character fires a gun. I mean, who's he firing at? It was that kind of action sequence. It was just all over the place. It was a mess, and it was nauseating to watch. The reliance on CGI in this movie. I mean, literally, they might as well have just made this an animated movie because the CGI use in this movie was just dreadful. I mean, everything from Black Panther's costume to the chase sequences to the action scenes. I mean, the amount of CGI, it was unbelievably dreadful. There was one action scene early on in the movie that was where they didn't use much CGI, and it was a scene that took place in a museum, and it was basically the villains of the movie being revealed, and that sequence was okay, but other than that, there wasn't one fight scene in this movie that I liked. Even the whole ritual fight scene between Black Panther and the people who challenge him. I mean, it just wasn't very good. Clearly, these guys had no idea what they were doing. There was no martial arts skill there. There was no, real intense encounters. It was just, poorly choreographed crap, in my opinion. And it really sucks because Captain America Civil War had some really, really good choreographed fight scenes, and Black Panther was involved in some of those fight scenes. So, how they were able to mess this one up so much, I have no idea. So, yeah, the action was bad. Another problem with this movie was the villains. Now, in the trailer for this movie, obviously Michael B. Jordan was hyped up to be the primary antagonist, which he is, and but another villain who was to be in this movie was Claw, who's played by Andy Serkis. Now, Andy Serkis is a great actor. Those of you who don't know who he is, he's the man who famously portrayed Gollum in the Lord of the Rings movies. Great actor, one of the most versatile actors in the business, a great actor from Britain, and he was in this movie. However, and let me just say that he was by far the best part of the movie. You know, the best actor by far in this movie. Best villain. Was one of the one of the funniest and more entertaining characters of the movie. You know, every scene he was in, he basically stole the show, I have to say. But the problem is, and minor spoiler alert here, so if you don't want to hear spoilers, don't listen to this next part. But minor spoiler alert, they kill Andy Serkis' character off like midway through the movie, like not even that far into the movie, to the point where he was basically just a side character, and it makes no sense because earlier on in the movie you get some expedition scenes about how much of a problem this guy is to Wakanda. Like for example, for the past 30 years, even with all the technology and all the advancements that Wakanda has made and all the secret agents they have all over the world and all the fighters they have and whatnot, this guy is somehow able to always stay one step ahead of them. You know, he's always able to elude them. He's able to steal their vibranium. We even find out in this movie that he has infiltrated Wakanda in the past and stolen with a little bit of help from spies, has stolen their vibranium from them, small pieces of it, of course, and has been able to build up his own weapons distribution and crime empire based on that. So this is a seriously powerful and influential character, you know, a character that should have been taken seriously as a villain. And the fact that they just killed him off so quickly, to me, was fucking dreadful, especially when the other villain in the movie, portrayed by Michael B. Jordan, guys, he was one of the most forgettable villains in the entire history of this Marvel Cinematic Universe. In the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe so far, leading up to this movie, there hasn't really been a villain which was forgettable. You know, every villain, except maybe the villain in Iron Man 2, who was extremely forgettable, played by Mickey Rourke. I mean, that was an awful movie. That movie was even worse than this one. Other than him, there hasn't really been a villain that was forgettable, but this villain, played by Michael B. Jordan, was just dreadful, man. I mean, he was basically the evil version of Black Panther. That's all I can say about him. I mean, he was, you know, he's a relative of Black. I don't want to spoil too much of the story, but again, minor spoiler alert. He's Black Panther's cousin who grew up outside of Wakanda. He actually grew up in Oakland, California, and obviously grew up around poverty and gangs and all that kind of stuff, and who ended up going to university and graduating, but then becoming a soldier and part of an elite kill squad. So this is a guy who obviously has a heck of a lot of military experience, heck of a lot of fighting experience, and you know his life's ambition, his life's goal was to take the throne of Wakanda, which seemed like a decent enough story, but just the way it played out was boring, man. I mean, he was just such a forgettable, such a cliche villain, man, and it was just basically like, in Ant-Man they have Ant-Man, and then they have Yellow Jacket, who's basically just evil Ant-Man. It was basically like that, except not as interesting as that. Oh, it was dreadful, man. And again, every fight scene between the two was just a CGI filled mess, shaky cam, poor choreography, and I didn't buy him as a villain at all. Michael B. Jordan, I think he's a massively overrated actor, to be honest. I mean, I know a lot of people liked him in Creed. I personally didn't like that movie. He was dreadful, absolutely dreadful in Fantastic, which was the the horrible reboot of Fantastic Four. I mean, that was a disgracefully bad movie. That was worse than this movie, a heck of a lot worse. And yeah, he was dreadful in that movie, absolutely dreadful, and he was equally as bad in this movie, in my opinion. I very much preferred Andy Serkis' villain to this guy. This guy was just so forgettable. I'm struggling to even remember the character's name. I had it in my head a minute ago, but I've completely forgotten now. So yeah, not a memorable villain at all. Very boring, very bland, very cliche. As far as the plot goes, there was a few glaring plot holes. Like for example, Why is Andy Serkis continuing to sell vibranium to the highest bidder? That's one thing I don't understand, because you guys remember in the Avengers Age of Ultron film, well, one of the things that happened in that film was Andy Serkis was in a conversation with Ultron, and one of the things that transpired during that conversation was Ultron hacked into Andy Serkis's offshore bank accounts and basically transferred billions, hundreds of billions of dollars into all his multiple accounts, and made him like the richest man on earth. And even made a joke about it too, about how, yeah, he said something like, keep your friends rich and your enemies rich and see which is which, something like that, he said. So by this point, Andy Serkis is extremely rich. I mean, his character shouldn't even need money. He shouldn't even need to continue on in this business, but for some reason he does. Also, another thing that I didn't buy about the whole plot, and this to me should be considered a plot hole, was this guy shows up out of nowhere and proclaims that he's related to Black Panther. He's Black Panther's cousin, basically. So he's related to the whole monarchy of this Wakanda. Now, Wakandans claim in this movie to be, kind of the opposite of savage, whereas the rest of the world think that they're a backwards third world country and a savage country. Their whole gimmick, their whole thing is that they're actually an advanced society and an advanced. They have advanced politics and advanced diplomacy, as well as having an advanced um, technological developments. But at the same time, they keep their traditions. They keep their ancient like warrior traditions. But why is it that if somebody is able to defeat Black Panther in a fist fight, basically, that then gives that person a claim to the throne? Now, to me, that seems pretty barbaric, and that seems pretty backwards. That seems like a medieval doctrine to have in your society. So if these Wakandans are, really an advanced race of people and an advanced technological society that that have like more futuristic technology and futuristic diplomacy and all that stuff, why is it that they still maintain this, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for, this doctrine where if the mortality of the king is shown by simply losing a fight, no matter what the ideology of the man who beat him in the fight is, I mean, that person could be a political tyrant like this character is, a warmonger who just wants to go to war with the rest of the world, the people of Wakanda still support that because he defeated the king in battle. That makes no sense to me. I mean, that's like something you see in like some old ancient, medieval doctrine, man. And it didn't make any sense in the context of this story, in my opinion. I felt it was just to try and come up with a reason for why these conflicts take place in the movie, because otherwise the movie wouldn't have been as long, and it's as if they just couldn't think of a more interesting plot, so they had to go for Black Panther loses, so he's no longer the king, and he has to come back and kick this guy's ass so he can become the king. Pointless, terrible storytelling. So I know it sounds as if I'm shitting on this movie. Was there anything good about the movie? I'm struggling to think about anything that was good about this movie. What the fuck were the critics looking at, man? Seriously, this is one of the worst, most forgettable Marvel Cinematic Universe type movies that I've seen. I mean, it's not quite as bad as Iron Man 2. Iron Man 2 was just dreadful in every way. I mean, there was nothing positive about that movie at all. At least this one, you can sit through it and you can imagine how Wakanda and how the Black Panther character himself will factor into the rest of the story, which is of course the interesting part of the story, which is the whole Avengers Infinity War that's coming up. It's cool to imagine how Black Panther fits into all that, but this movie itself is just it's just awful, guys. I don't even know what to give this movie as a final rating. Another problem I had with the movie was, now, Martin Freeman, whose character was introduced in Civil War along with Black Panther, um, he was in this movie too. Whereas in Civil War, you knew why he was in the movie. You understood his role. In this movie, I can't quite get my head around why he was there. I mean, what was he? What purpose did he serve in this movie? It's as if they brought him in so that they could have an outsider who could act as like the point of view of the audience coming into this technological wonderland, which is which is Wakanda, so that they could have some expedition scenes where they show off their technology, and this guy can be wowed as the audience are wowed by all the terrible CGI set pieces that they have in this movie. And that seemed to me like his only role in this movie was for expedition scenes, which I really don't like, because it was, they could have found a better way to introduce all this technology and to show off all their gadgets and stuff. I mean, it was all just CGI, nothing was real. So, I mean, they really didn't need Martin Freeman in this movie at all. He basically does nothing. Okay, he gets shot. They have to take him there to save his life. That's about it. I mean, yeah, and there's a few other things along the way, like he has to pilot a fucking virtual reality plane, but it was just pointless. It was just CGI crap. I wasn't even paying attention to that. So, yeah, this movie was terrible. It sucked. I thought about maybe giving it a 5 out of 10, which is a slightly below average, but I can't even give it that. I'd give this movie a 3 out of 10. That's my final rating. Terrible movie. Awful. Didn't like it at all. The one positive thing about the movie was, I suppose, that like I said, it opens a few doors for the later, for later on in the series, which is of course the whole Avengers Infinity War story, which I think is going to be really good, because you're going to have all the characters from the much better Marvel movies. Like, you're going to have Hulk, Captain America, you're going to have Iron Man, of course, Spider Man's going to be there, and it's going to be a really, really astronomically big finale that they're going to have. They're going to have Thor too, so, and a lot of people are going to die too. So there's going to be some quite emotional scenes in that movie, and I'm really looking forward to the Infinity War saga. So yeah, I didn't like this movie. Didn't like Black Panther at all. Thought it was a crap movie. The critics that are saying that this movie's good, I think that they've just been paid off, or I don't know. The critics that are saying that they like this movie, who haven't been paid off, and who just like it for whatever reason, that's just their opinion. Okay, I have different tastes I mean, we all have our own opinions and our own tastes, but in my opinion, this was a crap movie. Didn't like it. Um, and yeah, I don't know what else to say. So yeah, 3 out of 10, awful, way below average, and on par with Iron Man 2 with how dreadful it was. So let me know what you guys think anyway. Do you disagree with me? Do you think the movie was great like the critics do? Let me know what you guys think, and thanks for watching.